Will trickle in. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this panel event, second day of the Yale Innovation Summit. I'm Mike Crair. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Great. Welcome to the second day of the Yale Innovation Summit and to this panel session, Security in the Age of AI and Quantum. I'm Mike Crair. I'm a professor in the Department of Neuroscience here at Yale and Vice Provost for Research. So, artificial intelligence and quantum technologies are very rapidly advancing. They are fundamentally reshaping the cybersecurity landscape by introducing both transformative and defensive capabilities and unprecedented risks at the same time. This panel brings together leaders from industry and academia to explore how security practices, architectures, and organizational strategies could or should evolve in response to this rapidly evolving security environment. A central focus of our discussion will be on the future of cryptography in this new era. How will advances in AI influence cryptographic systems? How will quantum computing threaten current encryption standards and structures? And what will it take to build and deploy AI and quantum resilient cryptographic infrastructure at scale? Our panelists will also explore the evolving role of trust, resilience, and cryptographic innovation in securing systems, from foundational protocols to real-world deployment, highlighting where theory, practice, and policy must come together. As you will hear, they will approach these questions from very different perspectives, but I think you'll find they have many common concerns and observations about security in the age of AI and quantum. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'll ask the panelists first to introduce themselves. Deb, will you begin with a little bit about your background and your expertise?
Yep. So I'm Deb Briggs. Welcome. I work for NetScout Systems. It's a high-tech global company. I've been there for over 20 years. I've been in cybersecurity for, I'm just going to say 25 plus years. I refuse to date myself. And I'm happy to be here, have a very unique perspective on AI and quantum, and looking forward to sharing it.
My name is Eric Gallus. I am an independent consultant and advisor now, but I served recently as the CISO for a large education technology company. And similarly, we are faced with how do we start to incorporate the practices around AI and quantum and the risks from quantum into these scaled enterprises that we all have to secure.
Hi, I'm Ben Fish. I'm a professor here at Yale University in computer science, and my specialty is cryptography. So I run a research lab and teach courses on both on cryptographic tools like zero-knowledge proofs and post-quantum cryptography, as well as fully homomorphic encryption. And I also teach a course on blockchain technology, and I've co-founded a company that's in the blockchain technology space around 5 years ago.
And I'm Mehdi Namazi. I'm the co-founder and chief scientist at QNect, which is a quantum networking startup. So we are mostly focused on how to build the infrastructure for protecting against quantum computers and protecting the networks. And I'm always very happy to be back here. Before I joined QNect, I used to be a postdoc fellow at Yale.
One of our many great founders of quantum companies that emerged from Yale over the few decades. Deb, first question for you. AI is already changing the cybersecurity landscape. Where are you seeing the most immediate impact, both positive and negative?
So AI is, I just think of it this way. It's like the fastest airplane, like the Concorde, going fast. And just think about if we all could fly that plane. And we all just get in the sky and fly. That's what AI is. Everybody just going fast. Where the pitfalls is that the tooling and the security weren't designed into that airplane. It's an afterthought. And for people in the cybersecurity world, the tools aren't there. So we're playing catch up. So, there's risk out there. And right now we're just trying to get our arms around them. I like to use the analogy of, like the attack surface. So, how many endpoints, how many people, how many identities do we need to protect? And today, if I'm a person, Debbie, we have one identity, but then today, in today's world, I may have 4 service accounts. So there's 5 identities tied to me. In AI, they're saying that there will be people, most people will have 100 AI agents. And so you take me or a company of 2,000 employees and you multiply that times 100, and that's how many identities that you need to protect against. Because that identity is going, it's like having, I have, 10 AI agents, it's like having, or 100 AI agents, it's like having 100 interns. They're all great, but you got to give them a lot of direction, and you got to build guardrails around them. So I think the biggest thing to me is it's doing wonderful things, but the guardrails aren't there, and security is not keeping pace right now.
Thanks very much, Deb. Eric, for you, what are the biggest misconceptions leaders, including academic, industry, and government leaders, have today about AI-driven security threats?
I think it ties back to what you said, Deb, about it being like the fastest plane, like a Concorde. I think a lot of talk right now is hype about attacks that are novel against organizations, and that we're just not seeing that. There's a few that we are concerned with, and things like impersonation through deepfakes. That's pretty novel, right? That's not something we could do at scale or real time before. But for the most part, what you're seeing is just everything is happening faster and more efficiently. So I think that's the big misconception, is it's not about trying to find a new protection against a new attack vector. It's about how do we protect against a plethora of the same attacks we've seen before. So we used to say in cybersecurity, you don't have to be faster. It's like camping. You don't have to be faster than your friend. I mean, you don't have to be faster than the bear. You just have to be faster than your friend. Just outrun your friend, and the bear mauls your friend. But now there are literally an infinite number of mechanized bears. So now that just doesn't ring true anymore.
Thanks, Eric. And how does the rise of AI change the balance between attackers and defenders? And are we entering a fundamentally different paradigm now?
Right. So there was a concept of security and obscurity, and I think that the main thing to say is that AI makes that less and less true. Right. So it accelerates, as everyone has been saying, the ability of attackers to find vulnerabilities. And so the way that I think about it from a cryptography perspective is it puts the onus on us to design systems that are bound to be hacked. And so, for example, if you have clients relying on a service that is running on a remote server, and now you have millions of clients that will be affected by the program that's being run on that remote server being hacked, then you can no longer just put trust in the server. It's not that the service running it is untrustworthy, it's that you can't trust the service running it to run the correct program. It could be compromised. And so we can use things like cryptography in order to build in more verification on the client side. So if a client can verify that every time it gets the output of some remote program that's being run, that it verifies that it's correct according to some specification of the program that should be running, right? That specification is not the implementation. The specification itself is not vulnerable to an attacker. It's just a definition of the correct behavior of the program. If every client can get a certified proof that whenever it gets an output, this is the correct output of that of that program, if it were implemented correctly without vulnerabilities, then that could create a much more robust environment where the impact of attackers compromising vulnerabilities is not as high.
Super interesting. Thanks, Ben. So we've been talking mostly so far about sort of classical compute and AI, which is clearly an increasing threat and vulnerability for all of our systems. Maybe with the introduction and the emergence of quantum technologies, it potentially introduces new threats and vulnerabilities. So maybe you can describe for us, help us understand, maybe with the Quantum 101, what is it about quantum computing technologies or quantum technologies in general that make security even potentially more vulnerable?
Happily, yeah. I feel like there's always a lot of misconceptions and misunderstanding about what quantum computers can do, and everyone believes that these are these magical technologies that are going to take over and replace classical computers. Digital computers are amazing. They have many, many use cases that are irreplaceable, but they always have one very specific shortcoming. Digital computers are not often good for solving problems that, as their size increases, their complexity increases exponentially. There are a lot of examples for them that a quantum computer can do much, much better, and they're very good for humanity, like finding new drugs, finding new fuel sources, new batteries, so many like scientific discoveries. These are the things that getting bottlenecked by digital computers because they are just simply too complex for a digital computer to be able to solve, and a quantum computer is hopefully going to be very efficient with these kind of processes, things that if you add one atom to, I don't know, the 20 atoms, now the complexity gets 10 times more, not just twice more. But unfortunately, in mathematics, there are examples of these kind of processes too, processes that if the number of digits increases, it gets much, much longer for a digital computer to solve those problems. And a while ago, we figured out that there could be very good solutions for cybersecurity. One of them is, for example, factorizing large numbers. We realized that it's very hard to factorize very large numbers with digital computers, so we started using them as a way of protecting networks. And now, with quantum computers, we are very worried that they're going to be very effective towards these mathematical tools that we originally had. And then eventually, and then more worrisome, when these technologies become more mature quantum computers, they're also very good at brute force algorithms, pretty much just like not even trying to hack your cybersecurity protocols, but just guessing your password, because they're good at these kind of problems of just figuring out the solution in a very complex sets of answers.
Thanks, Mehdi. That's terrific. Ben?
Yes.
What does security by design mean in a world where cryptographic systems must also adapt to future breakthroughs?
Future breakthroughs, for example, in quantum computing?
Or in AI?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about quantum computing for a moment, right? Because so as Mehdi pointed out, quantum computers we know break much of the cryptography that's used in practice today, right? And so in general, when we talk about secure by design, right, it's always relative to some assumption. Nothing is ever perfectly secure. It's always secure relative to some assumption, right? Encryption is not perfectly secure. It's secure relative to the assumption that some, first of all, that it was implemented correctly, and if it wasn't implemented correctly, then we can't do anything about it, and that's the threat of AI, that humans make errors. AI coding agents make errors too, and AI is very good at catching errors as well. And so, if something wasn't implemented perfectly, then that is an issue. So we always assume that it was implemented perfectly, and so now we need to have stronger ways of verifying correct implementations. And we have a theory in computer science called formal methods, and so that increases the importance of those tools for verifying correct implementations. But then there's the underlying assumptions behind cryptography. So no encryption is actually secure. It's only secure up to the assumption that some kind of mathematical problem cannot be solved efficiently, and that's where quantum computers change the picture. Now, fortunately, cryptographers have been working for the last 2-3 decades on quantum-safe cryptography. And initially, it was just a way of getting grant funding because it sounded cool, right? But fortunately, or unfortunately, right, now there is potentially a very near-term reason to switch over to these more quantum-safe cryptographic tools. This is not in every area of cryptography. So AES encryption is not broken by quantum computers. SHA-256 hashing is not broken by quantum computers. There are certain kinds of public key encryption systems like RSA or like El-Gamal, which much of the internet runs on, digital signatures like ED25519 or Schnorr signatures, or much of the things that are used in practice are broken by quantum computers. We have replacements. The only issue with the replacements is that they are less efficient. And so we've been working for the last few decades on making them more efficient. For many things, such as digital signatures, we have alternatives that are pretty efficient. But when it gets to, fancier tools, then that's where there is a sharper trade-off.
Can I take that question? So I'm going to take a different take on secured by design. So from a practitioner's point of view, when you buy software, you put it on your computer, you expect that it's been tested and it's good. And we all know, if you've ever had a Windows machine, every month Microsoft has Patch Tuesday, and they're basically fixing patches in their software. And, everybody is saying, even Microsoft, we do secure by design. When we ship a product, we secured it and all this other stuff. And what we're finding now, because, everybody's probably heard about Mythos or the Glasswing project, where they've used AI to basically break software that's out there today. And, there's 40 big companies that got Mythos. And, I can tell you from someone who's responsible for cybersecurity for an enterprise, the number of patches that have come out in the last 2 months from the handful of companies that I use that have Mythos have not just doubled, they've gone tenfold. So in other words, if Microsoft released, 10 patches, now they're releasing 100 patches. Microsoft isn't just releasing on Patch Tuesday. They now have emergency patches in between Patch Tuesday. And so, I mean, secured by design is sort of in that moment. And what we used to think was secure by design, AI, has completely broken that because, the number of vulnerabilities that are being found that are so old, and we all have to patch them. And so from a cybersecurity perspective, that's one of the downfalls of AI. I mean, it's great that there's an AI tool that can find all these vulnerabilities, and they've sort of done the right thing because of giving it to the people who can fix their software before they release it. But the tsunami for the enterprises and everybody who deals in cybersecurity and having to patch. We used to have a patch cycle. Best practice was you want to patch criticals in 30 days. They're now saying you need to make that 2 weeks, potentially a week, potentially 3 hours. And I'm struggling with how I even have the manpower, even if I put AI on it and do automated patching, how that's going to work in this environment.
Eric, I have a question for you. Maybe you can follow up, but also address this question. So what emerging cryptographic approaches you think are most promising for real-world implementation? I think this fall, and that may have been where you were going to go.
Well, what I was going to say is kind of connect the two comments, because secure by design is about assumptions. And patching was an assumption that we could outrun the attackers and get the software fixes in before they're found. And I think that is an assumption that is becoming fundamentally broken. So when you talk about secure by design, we need to rethink that assumption. And that needs to be built into how we build software and how we deploy software and how people use software. Another assumption we've made is that, you can trust when a person shows up on a screen that that face on video is who they say they are. And that was a form of identification, and we can't have that assumption anymore. So that's, I think, what I wanted to do, kind of connect those ideas. But when you talk about encryption, it really is like doing the work that's being done to make it efficient and then getting it to a level where practitioners can actually implement it. That's the big thing. So even when I had my largest team, would never have somebody who did cryptography on a security team in an enterprise. There's just no way that I could justify funding that. I needed partners, whether that was my firewall providers, my security tools, somebody that gave me that capability and scaled the research that's being done here. That's what we need to continue to do, is we need to continue to make sure that we're taking those learnings and bringing them to a point where we can put them into practice, because, again, everyone's looking at their security teams and saying, I need less people here, and doing more stuff. So we can't have a fractured environment of every company solving this problem on their own. We need to be able to consume a scaled product.
Ben, you want to follow up on that?
Sure. I'm generally in alignment with everything that was said. I do think, though, that two things. One, there's a significant challenge that we haven't really touched on of upgrading the existing technologies that are embedded within all the software systems that we use to use, for example, quantum safe cryptography. That needs to begin before quantum computers are able to break these systems. And so even though we have done the research that has come up with quantum safe public key encryption schemes and digital signature schemes, the whole internet runs on these things. And there are clients that are not even upgraded to the latest version of TLS. And so it's a monumental project to transform the entire internet to use things that are safe. Right now, all the communication systems support backwards compatibility because it's difficult to get people to upgrade their software. So I think that the hardest question is, when do we start the transformation? On a very microcosmic level, this discussion has begun within the Bitcoin world, right? People are worried about Bitcoin security being broken by quantum computers. And so there's a whole question of, when do we switch over the signature scheme in Bitcoin to be quantum secure? That's going to have an impact on the efficiency of the system, but it's obviously necessary if quantum computers will be able to break signature schemes. And so there's this whole debate has people very, very passionate and angry on both sides about when to start the transformation. And Bitcoin is a tiny problem relative to the whole internet.
Yeah. So, Mehdi, this is directly following that. How should organizations think about transition to a quantum resilient cryptography, given the uncertainties around timeline and cost and standards?
Well, basically, to build on what Ben just said, it always comes to the long-term value of the data itself, because at the end of the day, there's usually a very easy way for hackers to go around data, and that's just known as harvest now, decrypt later. A lot of times, if they know that a data has long-term value, like, for example, Bitcoin or intelligence community data, health data, things like that, even if they know it's encrypted today and it's secure, they can always harvest it with the hope that in 10 years there is a way to break that. That doesn't apply to a lot of things. If you make a transaction today, by 5 days, it doesn't matter anymore what you did. But for government secrets, that matters for like 70 years. So for a lot of those things, we are already way too late for transitions to protect against quantum stuff. Or if those data has been harvested and a quantum computer comes, they can use quantum computers probably and hack them if they don't have quantum protection algorithms on top of them already. Same things with Bitcoin. The problem with a lot of these software protections is that it's the same thing, that even if you're dead sure that at that moment it is perfectly secure, you never can guarantee that later nothing happens to it unless it was a system that was quantum resilience or AI resilience and so on. So it's always a factor. And like in our case also, most of the people who work with us is often pretty much the three categories of intelligence community, financial sectors, and the critical infrastructures. But for critical infrastructure, the problem is that even a second matters for them. They cannot be the last people to get upgraded because you cannot bring the critical infrastructure down even for a second. So they always very worried about what happens next. So these are the industries who always invest in these things, at least on the research side of these things, before anyone else.
Thanks. Deb, you want to follow up, and then I have a question for you.
Yeah, I actually, so you talked about the runway. And so 2026, at the end of December, when we're talking to people, Q Day, or when quantum will be able to break encryption, people were saying 2030. So we had a 4-year runway. Last month, I've heard we need to be ready by 2029. So between the advances in AI and cryptography, in 6 months, you've already taken away 25% of my runway. And I did hear the other day someone mentioned 2028, and so I'm hoping it's 2029. I'd love it to be 2030, but if it's 2028, that takes away half my runway. And as you were saying, people are still running TLS 1.1, and they're doing it because, it's not. Yes, you just click the button and go TLS 1.2, but you're going to break everything. And everybody has to be talking that at the same time. And that's where the complexity comes into it. And so that runway with AI and the advances in quantum is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. So from an enterprise perspective, if you haven't started now, I'm going to say you're late to the horse race, because you should have that inventory now of what cryptographic algorithms you're running. But more importantly, as you said, Mehdi, is where is that data that is important? Like he said, my email to Eric, no big deal. But, if I've made a bank transaction, if I've got healthcare information out there, if I do anything with critical infrastructure, all that stuff becomes really, really important, and I would want to protect that. And so it's not only having the inventory of cryptographic algorithms, but it's also knowing the data, because you got to, go back. I go back to the word blast radius. You got to know what to protect first, because you're not going to be able to protect it all.
So this falls directly on that. So companies without deep technical expertise, what do you suggest? Like, is there a menu you suggest, or first, second, and third? These are really things they should be doing now or consider doing soon.
I would say for quantum computing, you need to know what cryptographic algorithms you're running. Now, there's easy ways to, I work at a company that deals in packet levels. The packets that cross your network, in that header tells it what cryptographic algorithm it is, so the person on the other end can decode it. So you can go at that level, but you can also just look at your systems, because your systems are going to tell you what encryption they're configured for. So it's know what you're using, but more importantly, know your data. And if we have the runway, let's just say it's still 4 years. I'm optimistic. 4 years. What data do I have today that in 4 years is still got value? And if it doesn't have value, maybe not that I don't care about it, but maybe I don't for protecting for quantum. The data that in 4 years is still going to have a lot of value is where I'm going to start.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what I was going to say. I think we're at a moment where the technical expertise is less important than the business acumen, because it's all about the data. What is the value of the data at that point in time when you're hearing the experts estimate Q days? And if you can't articulate that like that, that's not a technical item. That's something that the business side has to be talking about. So I just agree with it.
So Ben, going back to AI and more classical compute, AI creates concerns about the dependency on the correctness of LLMs and other types of AI algorithms. So, this creates vulnerabilities at the same time. So in light of this, what do you suggest, and what's the potential of LLMs to be compromised, and what defenses can we put up in the context of those compromises?
Right. I'm glad you're bringing this up. I would say that LLMs are just a today example of cloud computing, where clients are relying on software that they're not operating themselves, and LLMs have just accelerated our dependency on remote computations that we are relying upon for critical decision making, right? And so if an LLM were to give an incorrect response, or if a hacker were to compromise the LLM inference server and cause it to intentionally give wrong responses to certain kinds of prompts that clients are sending it, then if there are automated systems that are acting based on those responses, you've now just given an attacker a huge attack surface to compromise systems. And we can be talking about medical systems, right? We can be talking about cars, which are relying on remote signals to make decisions, real-time decisions. And so it increases the importance of building defenses around this. And I talked about this a few moments ago. There are tools in cryptography that could allow a server to prove to a client that it did its computation correctly. This is called verifiable computation. There's two different types of verifiable computation. There's formal methods, which is verifying that the implementation of something is correct. But even if the implementation is correct, that doesn't stop a hacker who took over a server and is now messing with the results. So then there's another type of verifiable computation, which is the ability to verify that even though you didn't run the computation yourself, you're not running the LLM inference locally, let's say on your phone, you know that when you sent a question to an LLM and you got a response, that is the correct response that the correct algorithm was supposed to give you. You can verify a zero-knowledge proof of that correctness. This is a technology that's matured over the last few decades, and it's become even more important now, given the proliferation of LLM services and our reliance on them.
Thanks, Ben. Eric, did you want to follow up?
Yeah, I'd just like to add that, we've been going back to this idea of assumptions being broken. We have, in security, relied on separation of code and data as a security control for a long time, so that you can make sure that you're sanitizing the data before it gets fed into the code and that you have complete control over that code and that separation. And what we're seeing now is that's an assumption that's being broken because an LLM, the code and the data is all, it's the instruction, it's the prompt. So it's all intertwined. It's more like a person. So yes, we can look at these proofs to make sure that it's doing what it's supposed to be doing, but you still have to think of it like if you went to someone in finance, would you ask them to do math in their head? Or would you ask them to build a spreadsheet or use a calculator, right? And that's their job. But you got to think of your interactions with these LLMs the same way, and I think that's how we kind of move this forward is ask them to do the tasks they're good at and to write code for you or to write the tools for you that will do the tasks that deterministic code should be doing. And I think that's where we're kind of falling down now is kind of just asking them questions and expecting them to do the entirety of it and not breaking down the problem so that we can accomplish it in its segmented parts.
Great, thanks. So we've mostly been talking about data systems. What about communications? And what impact might emerging quantum technologies have on the security of communications? And what defenses do we have for that?
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so that's basically my job and what I'm mostly focused on because it turned out quantum is not all evil for breaking all the securities in our future. We can also use it as a protection layer itself. So vast majority of the work we do is how to actually use quantum systems and technologies for encryption itself, for physical layer protection. I have this controversial idea and thoughts in general that I think one of the reasons that, and I could be totally wrong, but like the reason AI is so effective and everything is because we're just simply too online. Like just think about it. Like if someone made these LLM codes like 30 years ago, what could they do with it? Like it wouldn't even work. They would probably toss it away because there would simply not be enough data about us. We're just too dependent on the cloud, on the internet, on so many things out there that we even have these conversations right now, for example, and a good example of it is the systems that we work with, these quantum hardwares, they are very amazing sources of randomness. Quantum is fundamentally random, and we can design these in a way that gives us the best, purest forms of random numbers possible. And they are auditable. You can actually certify that these numbers were truly random, the user themselves. So even when we build these devices, they don't need to trust us, that the maker of the device itself. They can independently verify the randomness. And now this actually becoming like, we talk with partners from data centers and different places that even they care about it a lot because they keep saying that like they buy these random number generators, but it goes through so many digital layers that they don't eventually know, even if it started physically from a random number generator, if it is eventually a random number, they want to be able to know how real these random numbers was and how to actually audit it and verify that it was random. We do that a lot with cybersecurity. We are about to put a paper out with a financial firm on how to use quantum for position verification, how to know that the person you're talking to or the entity you're talking to is who they are saying they are by fundamentally verifying their location. This is something you cannot simply do classically. You can always spoof GPS. You can always spoof classical networks. But with quantum, you can force a user to prove their identity, they prove their location. So this way now, if you get a call from a bank Even if it says the bank, if it's the number is the bank, you can actually be dead sure that the call is from the bank because it's literally coming from a branch of the bank. It's initiated from a server from that bank, and it can be also used as an equivalent of a digital signature, a quantum signature that has the time and the location of that person encoded in it and is permanently there. Of course, comes with all the assumptions that Ben talked about. You have to make sure you didn't screw up anything at the time of implementing it. But if you do it so, you can always verify these things, even 20 years later, that a statement, that communication came from that person at that time, at that moment, which to my opinion is also very good at the age that more and more we cannot trust information itself fundamentally. So our problem is not just cybersecurity with AI, the problem is the information itself that AI is generating out there. And that's the work we do. Now, quantum encryption, quantum security layers, this position verification and stuff comes with a downside. Physical protection in general is expensive, it's resourceful, it's hard to add to the infrastructure. Like if it is so much hard to add post-quantum encryptions and these things, just imagine how hard it is to go change the entire infrastructure of a country and a nation and make it like physically quantum secure. So we are mostly focused on places that it matters the most. Again, intelligence communities, the communications between data centers, between major banks and so on. And then of course it will always be complemented with post-quantum technologies.
Anybody want to follow up? Okay, so I have a question for anybody. How do you recommend that industry, academia, and government collaborate to address these problems, current and emerging problems? Are there things that you suggest we are doing that are working, or things we should be doing that might be helpful or potentially transformative? Deb, you want to try? Big question.
Thanks. I think I'm going to go back to, how do we work together? In cybersecurity, industry is working with government. We're working, if Eric and I work for banks and we were competing banks at a cybersecurity level, we're peers and we're going to share information. And I think we need to take what we've been able to create in the cyber world in order to share, information that, if he's seeing something or he gets hit, he's going to tell me how to protect myself. I think we need to do that with AI. We definitely need to do it with quantum computing. The more big brains we have working on this, the better it's going to be. I think if you look at critical infrastructure, I'll say in the U.S., the way we protect power plants, water plants, the federal government, it's scary how weak some of it is. And you can't expect, the power companies or the water companies to have the money to protect that stuff. So I think as a whole, we have to solve this together and figure out how we can, because we all drink water and, you poison the water and what happens. And so I think there are fundamental world problems that we have to solve and protect today. Not to get too big, but you know what I'm saying? And I think people forget about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think humans in general are pretty bad at risk assessment. And so that can be easily seen by many people have bought really cheap streaming devices that they bring into their homes, put on their network so they can get whatever show they want. And it's riddled with malware. It is there to get a foothold in your environment and use your bandwidth to attack other people. That's what it's there for. And they know this, some of the people that have bought it, and they don't care because we aren't good at long-term thinking as humans in general and understanding the risk to us. So that's why I think regulation is usually a bad word, but if we want to get to a point where the least common denominator is quantum-ready encryption, which is what we need to get to in order to actually implement it, because otherwise we have to enable TLS, SSL, you can go back to, right, 3.0. We have to enable these legacy protocols forever because there'll be one or two people that do it. And being on the business side, if they're like, well, we have one or two big customers that are using this old proprietary encryption, we will continue to use that proprietary encryption until that money dries up. So something needs to be a forcing function to drive us away from that. So maybe it's not regulation, but something where there is the greater good is put above every organization's need to drive the right profitability.
So one last question, maybe for Ben and Mady first. What are you personally most optimistic about or most concerned about over the next 3, 5, 7 years in the realm of security in the age of AI and emerging quantum technologies?
Well, I'm highly optimistic that we'll be able to transition over to quantum safe cryptography. I personally have no idea when quantum computers will actually be able to break modern cryptography. That is definitely not my area of expertise, and I have a hard time believing that it's very soon, but I feel like it is soon enough, and we have developed quantum safe cryptography to the point where it makes sense to transition over. I'm, I think, a lot more concerned, and not about quantum computing, but about just general behaviors around data privacy and increasing reliance on remote software. I think it's, when you have much of society relying on very centralized services, and there are economies of scale to running LLMs in a few data centers around the world, right? And it's a incredibly intensive computations. The cost of the computing that is required to run the services that we rely on today is growing astronomically, and that increases centralization. And whenever that happens, the impact of an attack is even greater. So I'm a lot more concerned about just heavy reliance on remote software processes running, and there isn't a huge.
You guys heard about Canvas?
There isn't a huge incentive for businesses like, let's say OpenAI or Anthropic or even Google to eat the cost of creating cryptographic proofs of correctness or running things over fully homomorphic encryption. Like, we have these tools. You could send encrypted data to an LLM and get back an encrypted response where you can verify the result, and even if an attacker opened up the server that was running it, it wouldn't be able to understand everything. So we have these tools, but it's incredibly expensive to run them on top of what they're already doing, which is already expensive. And so they don't have a strong incentive to do that, right? And I think that is a massive coordination problem that's going to happen. Maybe the government will play a role in that. Government has always played a role in setting privacy standards, and that can have negative impacts, can have positive impacts. I don't know the answer to these questions, but that would be more of my concern than quantum computing, because we actually know how to defend against quantum computers.
Very much the same. Like, I think as humans, we sometimes need that push to make a change. It's unfortunate that AI and quantum is kind of happening at the same time, but I grew up always worried about data privacy. Like, every other day you would get an email that some company screwed up your data and they all got hacked and everything.